my name is Ralph and welcome back to the channel. It's my time, let's go. For all of you new viewers that are joining us, thank you very much, and please do hit that subscribe, like button and comment if you have anything to say. We appreciate it all. To all you regular viewers, welcome back. Let's keep at things. We're working away on Margaret this week and trying to get some things done among other things, and so today I got something a little bit different. When it comes down to getting these bikes going and everything, your starter can be the issue. So today I'm going to walk you through sort of how to refinish your starter, check your starter, how to see if it's working, how to check your armature, those sort of basic things to tell you whether your starter is your problem or whether it's something else. So I hope you find it interesting. Follow us along, see how we make out with ours. While you're in the process of restoring the old bike, there's so many things that you have to look at. You know, everything from the wiring to you name it are things that people often don't think about. And one of the things we're going to look at today is the starter for this. Harley made two kinds of starters for the old shovels, and in the earlier years they used this long one, which is a Prestolite starter, and they're generally what they call like a 6-inch body on them. And in later years, they used a Hitachi starter, which was considerably shorter. The Hitachi starters were shorter, as you can see. When you put the two side by side in the housing, there's about a ½ inch difference here. The Hitachis ran about 5-inch, and the Prestolites ran about 6. So there's a difference in the two types of starters and how they mount. The 6-inch one with the Prestolite had an extra bracket on the end for support, which was no longer needed with the Hitachi starter. So my brain kind of got ahead of me there when I was talking, but there actually are 4 different sort of brackets. Well, 3 really, but the 4th would be the Sportster one. So Hitachis ran from 82 to late 84, and they had 2 different sorts of brackets that you could get available for them. And they often incorporated the rubber mount for the oil tank as well. Now the earlier ones, the Prestolite, they just had a short little bracket, and that kind of bracket would just support the starter itself. So there were different sorts of brackets. So the 3 major brackets you can identify as to which starter that they would go to. So today we're just going to kind of have a look at it, because I don't know what kind of shape this thing is in, and I'm not about to bolt it back on the bike with all the rest of the work being done without checking the brushes and the armature in it. People always think of all the big items that slide the motor in, you know, put the forward controls on, bolt on the tanks, the oil tanks, but there's a lot of little components that also have to go on, like the starter, and there's lots of related components with them. Each and every one, if you're rebuilding, should be gone over and looked at. There's nothing worse than getting it all built and getting it all together and then finding that some little $2 part or some small component is causing you grief. So we'll start by taking the end bolts off of it. And these are through bolts right through the starter. And once you get them loosened off, you should be able to pull the starter off from the housing. And we'll take it all apart since we're going to disassemble the whole thing. And it will start to separate here. And we're wanting this big end to stay with it. So it will separate here in the small area, and you don't want to do that. You want just this big end to separate. So we'll just keep loosening them off a little bit by bit. And there's really only 2 components to them. There's an armature and the brushes. I guess I shouldn't say there was just like two parts to the starter. As you can see from the breakdown here, there's quite a few. The other major component being the field coils, which rarely ever go bad on them. So it's generally the brushes and the armature that are the real problems here. And if the armature looks good, it can be cleaned up on a lathe. And the brushes, there we go. We'll just pull the outer cover off, and it has a gear inside of here which can come out, and inside of this is a small needle bearing in there. Although it feels good, but and we'll take this piece and clean it all up. With that apart, we can slide these bolts right out. Kind of hold these two pieces together. And just give it a little tap on the end here, just to loosen it up. Something to note, when your cap goes back on, there's a hole in the bottom of it here, and that hole would be at the bottom when the starter is mounted. I believe it must be a drain hole for it. So we'll try to slide the cap off. Just going to kind of separate the two units, and we want to keep the brush plate in there. And looking in here, it will stick out a little bit. We can see it sticking out. So we'll just try to keep it in as we work the cap off. We should be able to gently get the cap right off of it. And there is another bushing inside of here. With the cap removed, now we can look at the brush plate. And there's 4 brushes in this starter here, and they're mounted on this plate. Now the plate is attached in different places, soldered on, so you really want to be careful when you're looking at it. What I'm trying to see is how good the brushes are, what the length is of them left, and what kind of shape the end of the armature is. And the end of our shaft here, of course, where the bushing runs in it. That looks to be in good shape and not chewed up. So just as a note, when we're removing the shaft, the end cover has to go on a certain way. And as you can see here, there's 2 lines right here on the cover. 2 small lines, and they have to line up with the stud for the battery when the thing is installed. So take note of that, because when that comes apart, there's a tab sticking up here, and where the double line is on here is actually cut away a little bit up in here. You can see how it's relieved up in here, and that's to go on that tab. So you need to line that up carefully when it goes back on. We're going to take it off today. And the other side has a single line, and this side has a double line. So we're just going to set this up in our vise lightly here, and not really clamp it hard, just a touch. And what we want to do is see what kind of shape my armature is in. Now, as I said, you can take the armature out, and if it's in a good shape, we just put it on the lathe and give it a light dusting, and then clean out between each of the lines, so to speak, in it. And that will help you. Of course, when I pull the body off, all of your springs are going to pop in, right? All your brushes are going to come out of place, and that can create a problem. So an easy way, if you don't want to take the brushes out and you think that they're all right, you can take, this is just a center of a push rod, you know, the thing that holds the spring in it, and we can just take that, or anything that's just about the same size as the brushes. It's hard to get something exact. And as we pull up on the body, we can keep that little piece in there, and that will allow us to keep our brushes in place so they don't pop out. We can inspect our field coils in here and make sure everything's nice and clean in there, and we'll clean those up a little bit. But that's a kind of a handy little trick. Now we'll have a look at our armature, and the armature looks pretty good all in all. One of the telltale signs when an armature is getting worn down is that these little grooves that are in here become almost non-existent, and you will see a spot. Usually you can see where the dark spot is on here. That's where the brushes are running, and this is where they're not running, and we have no edge on it at all. In a lot of cases, when the armature gets worn down, you'll see a ridge there, and sometimes you can turn the armature body down just slightly and then take like a hacksaw blade and clean out each thing in between and save your armature. But ours looks good. Now this is part of a bearing pressed into the body, and we inspect it all around to see if there's any really bad spots, dark spots, broken wires, anything like that, anywhere here, anywhere in this part of the armature body. And it all looks pretty good on this actually. Our bearing is pretty tight on there. So that's a good thing as well. Now I don't believe I can grab that in the lathe, which is kind of a drag, without getting the bearing off. And I really hate to disturb that. And I know this is too big to go through inside my chuck. What we can do is take some fine emery cloth and just clean up the surface of this. Well, let's see what I got up here. This is just some 600 grit sandpaper. And we're just going to go around and clean off the grime very lightly, not really removing any material. There's absolutely zero ridge on that, which means generally that the start is in good shape. As long as the other components are working all right, the field coils and such, or the coils in there, I mean. Yeah, I don't really see any need to put it in the lathe. You can actually take like a safety pin. And we're just gonna go on each groove and clean it out between each groove. Any of the sand grit that we got in there, or debris that would be there from the natural wear in the brushes. And there we go. That should about do it. There we go. I'm just going to take a brass brush and clean any kind of grit that's in the little grooves in here out. Don't get near the edges where the wire is. So the bearing in here feels pretty good. It's hardly moving, so I'm not going to take it apart. If I felt that this was wiggly and everything else, I would take it apart, but I'm judging by what the rest of the unit is like. I have hardly any movement in this at all. So I'm not going to disturb that bearing and press it out and put a new one in for nothing. Little shout out to my buddy Slick down south. If you haven't seen his channel, Slickhead Custom Cycles, you want to check him out. He's got a beautiful fleet of antique bikes there to make us all drool all over the place. Thanks for taking us along with you, Slick, to places like Nick's Cycle and to the swap meets and the shows lately. A lot of us don't get to see those kind of things, and I find it terribly entertaining to be able to look and see what other people are building and how they're making things. There's such not an amount of it up here, and yours seem to be saturated with it, so it's great to see, and I love to see all the stock parts. Like I said, I got to keep a Scott towel with me so I can soak up the drool when I see the tables full of parts down there. So keep at it. Check out my buddy Slick, Slickhead's Custom Cycles. So what I got here is an old Allen growler, they called it, right? And what it's for is checking the armature and the commutures to make sure that the thing isn't shorted out. And it's a very simple unit. And basically, we turn the thing on and we put an old hacksaw blade on there, and we shouldn't hear any noise out of it at all. The blade should just kind of brush around it here. So we'll see. We're not seeing or hearing anything there. Now I think if I take a washer and I stick on it on the end here and short these out, I may be able to give you an example. It's such a small armature that it's hard to say. You can hear it there. I know it's very hard to hear, but there is a change in the sound of it. But as long as I go around here and check it, everything seems to be normal there. Nothing there. And nothing there. This did have a probe unit that you could put on these to check in between, and the gauge would read, but it no longer works. And I may take it apart and try to see if I can restore it. But it doesn't. So the only other way to check this is by using our meter, and we just set it on the lowest resistance that we can. And you check from each segment. My little gauge here, it's made for bigger equipment than this. If we go from here to here, there should be nothing. As you can see on the meter, there's nothing at all. They're not grounded. Also from here to the end, nothing, see? All you got is a meter and you want to check your armature and figure out whether that starter or generator is bad. Here's the easy way to do it. Now I've got my multimeter set on continuity here, and you can see I get a consistent reading here in continuity. So we just touch one wire to it here, to one bar, and then touch to the next bar. And one bar here to the next bar. And we go around and do it all around, each bar, one bar to the other. Nine. They'll fluctuate a little bit, but they'll be pretty close to being the same each time. The next thing to do is to go opposite each other here and opposite. We can go opposite around. So they're not going to be exactly the same, but they're going to be close. So bar to bar, 180 degrees, and then here to here is your ground. And we should get nothing on any of the bars. I'll use this one because it's a little longer. But you can go around your whole stack here, checking each bar around as you go. And we have nothing. So we know our starter armature on this particular case is good. I'm going to next check the brushes to see where they're at. For all intents and purposes, I think this starter will work fine, and we'll have no problems turning the bike over like we want. So I just thought I'd run through that test for you, give you a quick thing to look at. The growler's kind of a neat old thing, and it's not really registering on my meter on the growler. I'm not able to use it because the ohms are so small on this, not even one to two, that it's not really coming up on my meter like it should. Had I had a bigger motor on there, it would work better. So just kind of neat old pieces of equipment that they intrigue me, and I used to do a lot of generators and things like that. So it would tell you for sure whether you were shorted or not quickly, or whether the short was between the armature, or whether the unit was good. So I hope those couple little things kind of point out to you a little bit as to what can be done and how you can check it, and how you can check it with the meter if you need to. So that's a little bit on the starter motor, and I hope it helps you out on how to check and just to make sure your armature is good. And while I think of it, I'm going to word out to my buddy Hippie down south. Hippie's got a great channel. If you haven't seen it, Hippie's Chopper Corner. It's never dull. Hippie is changing bikes, changing motors, moving things around, and he's always on the go down there. Hippie made me laugh trying to put that primary on with the gasket falling and fumbling everywhere. I've done that for so many years, but I had to have a chuckle when I seen that. I guess he didn't see my video on easiest primary change ever, or primary cover change ever, I don't know. Easiest primary install, I guess it was. And it shows you a little trick there with some bolts to help you put your primary on, and that'll make your life a whole lot easier. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. Glad to see you working away. The bikes are coming along great. I love the stance of some of the new ones there. Keep at it, bro. Keep us entertained and keep on moving ahead. So be sure to check them out. Hippie's Chopper Corner, home of the sketchy choppers and the stock frame killer. So the last thing we got to check is our brushes in here, and I can see where our wires are going into them, and they say 1/4 of an inch, and mine are a good 1/2 an inch in there, I can see. So the brushes look really good in there. About 3/8 of an inch. Easy just to see on the back side where there's no wire. I'm almost 3/8 of an inch there. The length of the brush, 3/8. So there's really no need for us to replace those brushes in there. Now if they're getting down below 1/4 of an inch, they say they should be replaced, but ours are not, so they look good in there. So we make sure our plate's in place where we want it, and we're just going to pop it back together. And there should be a notch, and there's a small notch right here, and there's a small notch in the body right here, and the small notch on our body right there. So we watch that these don't fall out on us. Just slide this down. Not quite enough. Our little thing is not quite big enough to go over the edge. So we'll just take our little pin, just pull as the wire, just pull back the wire on one side, enough to get it started. The wire on this side. Just wiggle it around so that you can start those down there. That side's in. And we'll just wiggle this one back this way. There's always one. Doesn't quite want to go there. There we go. Just take your time. It's better than having them all pop out of place. Ideally, this is not the perfect size, but it's pretty close. So it'll help you from, instead of them all popping out. Now we make sure that our plate is in place. And that our notch is in place there. Plate in. And I'm just going to go and clean this up a little bit on the wire brush before I reinstall it. So there, we got it just kind of cleaned up a little bit. It looks a little bit better than it did. And again, we'll look for our marking notch. This little notch right here. And this little notch goes right up with this tab on the top of this, right here. Just put a little tiny bit on there for the bushing. And there we go. And if you're lined up in the proper place, your bolts should go right down through. There we go. I was just in the way of the vise. Whoops. To watch that you don't get a little wire, one of the wires out of place. And it was trying to push down on that wire. It's worth it, take that extra second, or you could break those wires. There we are. Lift the old unit off carefully. So before you go put your starter away, I suggest you take some 1/4 inch coarse thread nuts and just screw them on the end. Finger tight to hold everything in place. That way when you grab your starter or do whatever you have to do, in my case I have to sand it down a bit and paint it and do some things to it like that, I won't have to worry about it flying apart to pieces. Just mask it off, sand it, mask it off, and paint it. And there, a couple nuts in there. She won't fly apart. Hope that helped you out a bit today. Now all I have to do is clean up the outside of it, throw a coat of paint on it, and it'll be ready to go. we'll see if we can get a little coat of paint on the starter now that we've checked everything and made sure it's good to go and tight and right. We just need to put the paint on it and it'll be ready. I'm not a very good painter. We'll try. Alright, let that sit for a minute. Well, we'll try to get another coat on her here. Alright. We'll leave that one and let it set up a little more. And come in and put the finishing coat on it. Last coat on and then I can set it aside. Check it off the list. I'm out there cleaning my wheels while I'm painting here, so there's always more to do. Shiny. Coats on it, and you never see it when it's in there anyway. So, but just nice to have it all cleaned up because it was a mess. So we'll just let that dry so we can move it, and maybe we'll put that over on the on my stove to bake a little bit. But it'll probably be all right there. When I get ready to move it somewhere tonight, set it, then it'll be good. Well, it looks a lot better than what it did. Not perfect, but better than the old beat up thing that was in there, and we know what's inside of it now. So I guess at this stage of the game, our test wouldn't be complete at all if we didn't see that the starter ran. So this is the quick and easy way to check your starter, check your work afterwards, and make sure before you bolt it all on the bike and then you go, well, I went through it and it seems to be okay. It's always nice and comforting to know that the thing will spin when you're done. So in order to do that, we're just going to need a couple things. We're going to need a battery, like the battery out of your bike, and we need to mount the starter fairly solid in the vise or however you're holding it. You could hold it on the bench as long as you hang on to it. I don't want to clamp mine too hard because I just painted it, but that's all you need. Just some 2 items and a set of jumper cables. Once you've got your items ready, all you have to do is put your negative jumper on here and your negative jumper on here. We've come around to the rear of the starter and we're just putting the jumper cable on the bolts. That's where you would mount your ground to your starter, and that would ground out the system. I guess if you had it clamped in the vise and it was solid, you could just put a jumper on the vise, but this way I'm sure that it's direct. So once we're ready to go, we'll just take our positive terminal now, and we're just going to touch it to the positive terminal here. Just snug your nut down there so that's a good connection and not just loose on the nut. Also make sure that the 1/4 inch nuts that you've put in here to put your body together, that you've tightened them up before you go to do this test. And all we have to do is touch it here for a matter of seconds. And we can see that our starter is great. Nothing to be worried about. Fully confident I'll be able to put that on the bike and be sure in my own mind that the starter is going to work. I feel good about that, and it's one more thing done. So that shows you how to check your starter there to start with. You can actually go through that check before you take your starter apart. If you're not sure whether the starter itself is turning or not and you take it off, you can do this check and see that it's turning over, and it should turn over strong like that one does. So I hope that helps you out. So if you enjoyed this video today, like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell. It helps our channel to grow. Everything's going along good, and it's one piece at a time as we go at it. So, you know, every day it's another day. Every day it's another piece. I'm still waiting on my paint. Now it's been a week. They said they'd call me back. They didn't. So I'm held up there as far as putting Margaret's motor together, but there's lots of other small things that I can do. All right. See you next week.